Hey, wonderful. So happy to see so many smiling faces this early in the morning. We're really pleased to have you all here with us. Welcome to the final piece of our Community Catalyst program for the year 2020. It's been a heck of a year. We're really quite pleased to have managed to make such a success of the program despite many challenges throughout the way with the way the year has been. We managed to start in person in March with a 2-day sort of retreat. And then immediately after that, it seemed that everything closed and everything went down into lockdown. So it's been a really interesting time for all of our participants, and I'm really pleased with the way that they've been able to come together with each other to support each other and to really pivot their programs through the chaos that has been this year. My name is Babs Weber. I'm the interim facilitator for Alberta Social Innovation Connect. You may have seen my smiling face around if you've been at anything in the last few months with ASCI. And we're also joined today with Elise, who is our information designer. And so if you're having any sort of a technical issue at all, you can feel free to just pop down into the chat and message to Elise, and she'll be happy to help you out with that. We wanted to be able to start out, we're going to launch right into the projects. There were 6 projects in total this year that have spanned across the province and across a variety of topics that have managed to do some amazing things, and I can't wait for you to hear about them. But before we do that, what we did want to do is we want to acknowledge the land that we are on across Alberta, and we wanted to acknowledge some of the things in it, particularly water. Water is something that's a great source of innovation because it is a basic need for any living thing, but there's so many facets attached to it, from systems and science to policy and the way we treat water, to cultural tradition and social recreational culture. Access to water, or the scarcity of it, is and will continue to be one of the greatest kind of boiling points of global relations in the coming century. Today, many of us in the program and in the call will come from 3 major watersheds across Alberta. That of the Athabasca River, where I am located and make my home, which leads up through to Lake Athabasca and then through the Mackenzie River into the Arctic Ocean. And then into either the North Saskatchewan or the South Saskatchewan River, who join to make the Saskatchewan River. Many of our participants today live along the tributaries in this watershed, including the Old Man River, which is named after Napi, the old man of the Niitsitapi peoples. And that flows through Lethbridge, where it comes across at least one of our learning groups. Where the North and South Saskatchewan rivers meet, it turns into the Saskatchewan River, which flows to Lake Winnipeg, then through those more watersheds through to Hudson's Bay. Water from Alberta does flow to one other spot. The Milk River runs south where it meets the Missouri River, which then flows into the Mississippi, which flows into the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana. So these waters and their waterways are a source of life for countless creatures, plants, and people, and a source of connection for countless generations. People have gathered on this land since ancient times and have often shaped or been shaped by the flow of water. Alberta is the traditional home for many Indigenous peoples: the Nehewak, the Niitsitapi, Nakota Sioux, Saulteaux, Dene, and Métis, and then many other Indigenous folks from across Turtle Island and beyond have made this land that we share in Alberta their home as well. Wherever our roots, we are all treaty people in this province and in this country, and that's something that we wanted to acknowledge today as we started. I encourage you to take a break after this session and get in touch with the flow of water where you are, whatever part of the water system it may be in solid or in liquid form, and to learn more about the people who've traditionally used your area as a home and a gathering place and continue to be there today. So with that, we're happy to welcome our very first group. Kayla Blackadar and Nicoll Schreiner have been working very hard from the area of of Strathcona County, and they have had a lot of an interesting time of it as their roles are very much embedded within a larger system, with how they've then been able to then take their project and be really thoughtful about the ways that they go and support through the community. So take it away, Kayla and Nicoll. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you all. As Bab says, my name is Kayla Blackadar.
And I'm Nicoll Schreiner.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen. I am going to turn my video off because I'm a little nervous about what my computer can take. So I'll just have the presentation on. First time presenting through Canva as well, so hopefully it works. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, it looks good. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So we are representing a youth-focused project for the community of Strathcona County, which is made up of the urban hamlet of Sherwood Park and various smaller rural hamlets, including Ardrossan, Antler Lake, Collingwood Cove, Half Moon Lake, Hastings Lake, Josephburg, North Cooking Lake, and South Cooking Lake. Thank you for allowing us to share a little bit of our project and experience with the ABSI Community Catalyst program. We've truly enjoyed this opportunity to learn and grow as change makers and social innovators with this amazing group of people, and to give back to our community in a slightly different way than we would have in our original roles.
So looking back at how we got started, I came up with the idea to apply for the project after Kayla brought the opportunity to a meeting for a coalition we're both a part of. We'll talk a little bit more about that coalition later. But we have a youth hangout space at the Ardrossan Recreation Complex, which is the main facility I work at, that we call the Youth Lounge. So it's been underutilized historically by youth, but many youth visit the facility for various recreational activities, including students coming over from the schools within walking distance, but they'd often choose to hang out in other spaces, such as back hallways or staircases, and occasionally do things like leaving garbage, graffitiing the building, swearing, playing inappropriate music, all those kinds of things. So there was a lot of suspicion, frustration, misunderstanding from staff and other guests in the facility. So I've always had the mindset of saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and we believe that it's better to have the youth in the facility, even if they're engaging in these kind of behaviors, because there are caring people around to support them, rather than to have them out elsewhere where they could be making trouble or doing other things where there isn't that support. So with Kayla joining me, we wanted to look at the opportunities and spaces you've had for recreation and socialization, especially in these rural areas where youth can't thrive or access spaces as easily, and especially for some of the youth that didn't fit into some organized sports or activities and didn't really have that space to be in. So you'll see from the rest of our story that we haven't really gotten back into the youth lounge yet. We've switched directions a few times due to facility closures and things like that, but we do hope to revisit this again in the future. As we move forward into the project, our observations of the community youth were somewhat confirmed by the youth needs and assets assessment that was done by Strathcona County in 2019. So this report also added some additional areas for us to consider, and the key recommendations were around communication and engagement, collaboration, mental health, gathering spaces, transportation, and affordability. So one of the big but simple things that happened early on after getting selected to be a part of the cohort program was the support that came from coworkers and the interest in our project as the word spread. It was really interesting to see how people were just excited for us and interested in following and supporting the journey. And it showed us how many people in our organization are interested in change and doing good for the community, and how just a small idea can grow by throwing it out to other people. So our organization is big, but there's definitely room for more collaboration between departments, between buildings, between work groups. Networking and just asking is so important. So we've seen that a lot through this process. And then meeting the cohort and ABSI network was a great way to dip our toes into social innovation and change making officially. As we continue through this journey, I think we both realized that while we hadn't used those terms before, we've been doing work in those areas, just not as intentionally. So we left excited about completing our first video story for ABSI, really energized and mind racing about our project and its possibilities, and motivated by our hardworking and inspiring cohort, for sure.
So from there, we went to the building and understanding of our goals and our community capacity. And through that, we worked with Interweave, which we learned about through the program launch, and attended their impact statement webinar. It was extremely helpful for us to determine what it was exactly that we wanted to achieve. Our impact statement was beneficial for ourselves at the project level, but also for sharing out when we were collaborating with others, so that everyone knew where we were coming from and what our objectives were. And Adam Fletcher from the Free Child Institute, we also connected with. We offered through him a training opportunity to learn about youth engagement and youth voice. We started across our networks to just get really an opportunity for everyone to learn together and to everyone be on the same page in regard to youth voice and engagement. Next, we have our summer wellbeing kits. So Nicole and I worked with the mental health capacity builder team to create the 5 ways to wellbeing kits. This was another opportunity for us to collaborate and amplify an initiative to support youth mental health by providing funding and brainstorming meaningful items to go into the bags. So the 5 ways, as you will remember from Babs providing us our own little wellbeing kits when we had our mid-convening, were being active, give, taking notice, connecting, and learning. So next, oh, too far, sorry. Oh, I gotta zoom out, sorry, bear with me. There you go, okay. And zoom up. Okay, so next in our journey is talking a little bit about the Strathcona County Youth Instagram. So we were having trouble finding ways to connect with youth after COVID-19 hit, because we no longer had the recreation facility to go into and engage with youth through there. So we wanted to create a youth-focused Instagram page to reach youth online. However, after conversations with our corporate communications team, we realized that it wasn't possible to create our own page. So they did allow us to run a youth campaign through the corporate page. So the 3 themes for our posts were about well-being, spotlighting youth initiatives, and focusing on youth voice. So our well-being posts were another opportunity for collaboration. We connected with our mental health capacity builders to create content that was focused around youth well-being and mental health. And we hope that moving forward, they'll want to continue this collaboration or even take on the youth campaign themselves. Youth Spotlight was just an opportunity for us to share youth-focused and youth-led initiatives in the community. And like I said, Youth Voice, providing kind of awareness and education on the various forms of youth voice, whether that be youth voice at home, youth voice on the internet, and just kind of really broadening people's awareness around youth voice and how youth can actually share their voice.
Okay, so then the next thing we worked on was our youth movie night, or back to school bash as we called it, so back in September, which came about because we wanted to create a safe, distanced opportunity for youth socialization and entertainment during a time that was kind of filled with some uncertainty about being back at school for students. So we hosted an outdoor in-person event for about 60 youth that showed up. And we had a pre-show art contest and music concerts, snacks, a safe gathering space for youth to socialize and relax, and movie entertainment on the big screen with a showing of The Princess Bride. So we ended up with some additional planned and unplanned outcomes, including getting to support a local up-and-coming vendor, providing a showcase for some youth talent with the entertainers and singers that were performing, an opportunity to introduce youth to resources and information about youth-focused organizations in the community and some mental health and well-being supports, and a chance for some face-to-face networking among our coalition members and staff from other county departments. So the event was a success, despite a few hiccups, as there always are with new events, but it's something we would consider doing again, especially when we have the opportunity to safely gather even more people together in the community again.
So next, I'll just touch on our Strathcona Child and Youth Coalition. So prior to March 2019, this coalition was known as the Early Childhood Coalition. And along with Parent Link becoming a family resource network, the Early Childhood Coalition made the decision to change to a Child and Youth Coalition. So this is a substantial change, and it's allowed us to take a step back and really determine what we want to do as a coalition. So we're currently working towards developing our theory of change in order to meaningfully guide our work. And we're relying on tools that have been shared with us through the Community Catalyst Project, including learnings from Interweave, where we create our own impact statement, the Community Toolbox, and Jamboard. Actually later today, this is what we're doing. So along with that is the Strathcona County Youth Strategy and Steering Committee. So the Strathcona County Youth Strategy and Steering Committee was actually developed in March of last year. However, because of COVID, or sorry, this year, 2020, it's not 2021 yet, even though I think we all want it to be, but this work was paused because of COVID. So the objective is to develop a youth strategy for Strathcona County in partnership with community and youth and young adults to address a collective commitment that youth feel connected, included, and supported, and access a range of programs and services that meet their needs. Youth are truly at the center of the strategy and will be driving the decisions needed to develop action to address the priority areas that were identified in the Youth Needs and Assets Assessment that we mentioned earlier. So my role on that is on the core project team, and Nicoll will actually be sitting on the steering committee as a representation from the Recreation, Parks and Culture. And we'll be able to share learnings from the Community Catalyst Project, as well as act as a bridge between the coalition and the steering committee in order to build on each other's efforts and not duplicate.
Get to the next one. I'll just start talking. You'll get there.
It's harder to switch.
Oh, you're good. So yeah, we're just starting to get involved with systemic design exchange to look into some ways we can gain some facilitation support in 2 different areas. So we're hoping to build on our community's resource map so that we can see the assets and the gaps and better identify areas that need support. And secondly, to look at how we can use our resources more effectively to address those gaps. For example, allocating goals for action in the coalition and an advisory committee that complement each other without leaving those gaps or overlapping. So they provided some exciting suggestions. We're just getting started with them, but around looking at the learnings from Edmonton's Clairview Community Recreation Center youth space, revamping that area that we're going to start to look at when we reconsider opening our spaces back up. And we'll also be looking at the learning from our Boys and Girls Club, Canteen Youth Hub that's just opening in Sherwood Park. And I'm thinking we're going to have to reach out to Calgary's Community Hubs initiative again. That we started to kind of look at it, the launch, but kind of lost that connection through the way. But a few things that we're excited to start continuing to look into.
So throughout this whole project, we've had a lot of ongoing Community Catalyst cohort involvement. And the pandemic has created a lot of disruption in our lives for sure, but what it's also done is highlighted how easy it is to connect with people across the province, country, and even world. So our cohort meetings, facilitator coffee chats, and mid-convenings have taught us both so much. We've learned things about our community, about the systems we work in, and about ourselves. And actually just wanted to bring up this little unicorn. It was an article that Babs shared with us called Unicorns in Government, a Community Practice of Reflection. I don't know if a lot of people have gotten a chance to read this article yet, but I loved it. And I actually shared it with students in my program and everyone loved it. So what's really stood out for us is how it talked about how change making work is really hard. And sometimes it can lead to burnout. But we're not alone in this work. And the idea of peer safety nets can really help to support ongoing innovation. And I think this idea couldn't be clearer throughout this project. With all the connections that we've made, the resources that we've shared, I feel like we've created our own unicorn group. So it's been really awesome.
So one thing that really stuck out with us from our last cohort call was the idea of ethical reciprocity and how the teacher or facilitator's role is to share where knowledge came from and its meaning. it's the learner's role to then contextualize that, how the knowledge is meaningful to them. I hope I hit that right. I can feel you guys like really listening in on this part. But we know most of you were in that call with us, but we'd like to give back a little bit to each of you by sharing one thing from each of those calls that really spoke to us. So thank you to Lyle, Matt, and Julia for sharing this information around ethical reciprocity and gift economy with us, as well as the land acknowledgement and other works from your students. Thank you to Eily for sharing your music and guiding us through thinking about things we were celebrating and grieving in the midst of the beginning stages of the pandemic. Thank you, Eduardo and Alabama, for welcoming us virtually into your greenhouse and farm and sharing the passion and joy you have for making it so successful for your community. Thank you, Jerome, for sharing some of the cultural background behind your work. We also appreciated your what do you do, how do you do it, and why do you do it icebreaker, and we plan to use it to connect with our coalition members. And thank you to Dre's Angels for introducing us to Jamboard and the Community Toolbox. We've used both of those quite a bit in the last little while. And the discussion helped us recognize that we needed to be intentional about our voice and tone for our Instagram content, and sparked the collaboration with our graphic designer that has made all our posts all look and feel consistent. So thank you all for those little bits of inspiration content from all of you.
So now we're kind of here in the present at the Community Catalyst program wrap up. And as this program is coming to an official close, we'd just like to say how grateful we are to be a part of this group of learners and risk takers. This cohort has given us the opportunity and confidence to grow in our networks within our own organizations and with wonderful change makers outside of it. And we've been given chances to share successes and thoughts, as well as failures and multiple ideas, failing to come to fruition due to technology challenges, municipal government structures, COVID and facility closures, not having enough time or knowledge on our processes, or trying something new that just didn't work out. We've learned a lot about ourselves, our roles, and our community through these ups and downs. So thank you all.
So we've popped around and through a whole bunch of different things, tried a bunch of different things, but looking at our next steps, we'll be continuing to work alongside the Youth Strategy Steering Committee and the Coalition, and between Recreation, Parks and Culture, Family Community Services, and other departments, and looking at ways that we can bring these groups together to amplify and support various community initiatives, such as Boys and Girls Club Youth Hub, skate park that's being built, and we'll be waiting and preparing for the moment when we can get offline and safely provide those physical hangout spaces again. So we're excited for all the different possibilities that are coming out there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your work. That was really incredible. I think we have time very quickly for a quick question. If anybody has one question for these ladies out of the audience. Let me just go to gallery view.
Yep, I have a question for them. What was your biggest failure in the project, and what was something that you learned from that? And how do you teach that to the youth that you're working and serving?
Nicoll, do you want to take that one?
I don't know. We might have different ones. I would say that maybe the biggest failure would be getting stuck in that this was our plan, and recognizing that we had to go bigger picture, with the fact that, okay, this is our goal, this is our intent, and how we went about that, it didn't have to stay the same. It could change. So I think multiple times throughout the process, we got stuck in, okay, we can't do this anymore, like this doesn't work. But it wasn't about creating the youth lounge or creating this or that. It was about having the safe space for youth, and however we did that was okay. I don't know how you would pass that on to others, but that's definitely something we'll have to think about. Yeah, that's a great question, Jerome. Kayla, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's so accurate, because I think we, especially at the beginning, we were really like, oh my gosh, like what are we gonna do? Everything was just completely flipped. But we had a conversation with Babs about how how important it is to just think of that, that big picture, and that we can still create change, even if it's not as planned. So I think what you could do to pass it on is to not get stuck in like one way of thinking, and just really be open to possibilities. And even if it's not what you originally planned or you really thought was going to happen, like I think about youth not experiencing the grads that they wanted. I think that high schools and schools really got creative and still celebrating youth and that time, because it's so important. So something about just trying to just think out the box, think outside the box.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we're ready, I think, now for our second group. So Tasha and Karen have been working really hard with an organization that they founded that's called Dre's Angels. And I won't get too much into where the name came from, because I am sure that that's something that they're going to share. But they have been looking at how might we change around the way that social support can help support youth who have multiple reasons why they are underestimated by the system and by the people who would normally be supporting them. So I'm going to pass everything over to Tasha and to Karen. Let me just make sure that you guys have access to be able to share your screens. Now you do. Take it away. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Fab. Sorry, I'm just kind of blowing in here, so I just got settled. I'm Karen, and Natasha's there. Gonna introduce yourself or just wave, I'm not sure. So Dre's Angels is an organization that was founded really by our youth, Drayden, who was a youth that I met through, he was a student of mine as I was a teacher, and he had many obstacles in his life. So he was struggling with a lot of trauma, addictions, and homelessness, and he reached out for support. And in that support, through supporting him, I met Tash, and he met Tash. He kind of introduced us as he was living in a housing complex that Tash was a mentor at. So in December, he was really struggling, and we got him into the housing complex in January, and he really worked hard to turn his life around. His little brother was also having a lot of the same barriers and issues that he himself was struggling with. And he often talked about getting settled and getting himself in a good place so that he could bring his brother in and support him and kind of carry on, help him to graduate. And so his goal was to graduate, get a job, and then help his brother do the same thing. So he was doing really well in January, got into school, really focused. Unfortunately, his little brother overdosed and passed away in February, which sent all of us into a tailspin, to be honest. It was a very difficult time, but with the support of, we supported him, but he also supported us. His family was very supportive. We were just kind of really connected really solidly at that point, and we just kept moving forward. Drayden managed to continue in school, stay clean, and graduate. He went off to work. Actually, the day of his graduation, he got the phone call to go work fighting fires up north and was so excited. So quickly after graduation, we packed him up and sent him on his way. He came home for a break in mid-July and got really, really ill, and ended up passing away from going toxic. Originally they thought it was strep throat, but it was actually pneumonia. So he ended up passing away at the end of July. So after his brother passed away, Drayden and I had a lot of conversations about the system and how hard it is as a youth that doesn't have support or access to really do something and move on with their lives in a positive way. And so we talked a lot about what are we going to do? How are we going to change this? What what do we need to do? And we had many discussions, and that was kind of the path that we were going to embark on together. And so when he passed away, Tash and I kept in touch, and we ended up forming Dre's Angels to continue the legacy that Drayden wanted to see. And I don't think we had any idea what we were getting into, but we've learned a lot. And so basically what we wanted to address is, how do we help youth access and get the same opportunities as everyone has, whether they have support or not. And so we're originally going to do the youth from 18 to 24, 25-ish. And as we got connected to more people, we started having youth come to us that were underage. So we kind of had to switch gears on how we were going to do this, but it also really highlighted to us all the stuff that happens before these kids become adults, before they turn 18, and how many barriers that have already been put in their way to basically create the problems that they're facing as young adults. And that being like poverty and homelessness and being in the justice system. Most of our youth, in fact, I think all of our youth, have been in court and have had those issues. And a lot of times those get compounded because they don't have the support to get to court. So then they have warrants, and then they have fines, and then it just snowballs, and it becomes such a hopeless place sometimes. So we wanted to make a difference and change that, and basically offer family support. So family style support. So we've kind of stepped in and just been like we would be for our own family, our own kids, our own nieces, nephews, brothers, and sisters. And when they call, we answer that call and support them the best way that we can. As many of the supports that are already here, as many of you know, are 8 to 4, whether it's housing organizations or social supports or whatever system, school, right? You know, all these places these kids go where they can actually receive support and help generally are 8 to 4. And that's not really functional for youth that may find themselves stuck in a problem at midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning, or they're sick and they just really need some crackers and chicken noodle soup. And so we really have been trying to address those problems, or those gaps. And it's been very successful. The youth that we work with, we built strong relationships with. They reach out to us, and we can see their lives changing in a positive way, and that they know that they're always supported. We could tell you thousands of stories of the gaps in the system, but I'll just share a couple that are really, really stand out to us. And one of them is housing. We know that youth, anybody needs to be able to have a stable environment before you can go to work and get up in the morning and be able to, you need a place to sleep, eat, and live. And there's a perception out there that housing is available, which it is, but the way you have to go about it to get it is really, really difficult. And we've had one youth that's been housed 3 times in the last couple months. And after the first quote unquote failure, some of the supports that were helping him, the comments that are made are, well, we got him a house. He had a place. So if he's not there anymore, that's not our problem. He couldn't keep it. And so there's no room for any kind of mistakes. There's no room for any kind of hiccups that may come along. And really, as we were in that situation, part of the reason he was losing that housing is because the organization or the people that were supporting him to pay his rent hadn't paid his rent. So his rent was past due. It was causing issues. He knew he was likely getting evicted, and it just went out of control at that point. So he's doing well now. So with support, he's working and kind of seeking his own housing on his own, but is stable right now. But there's a lot of support there from Tash and I and an employer that is working with him. So that's kind of the things that we are doing. We also have trying to get youth to have access. We look at youth that maybe are the system is their guardian. How do they get a driver's license when they don't have a car or anybody to take them to drive? How do they get a learner's or a driver's if they have nobody once they've gotten their learners to help them practice? or provide even driving school or whatever it may be that you need to get your license. So many barriers in the way that people we just take for granted because we just go do those things. We had a youth who wanted to get a job, and because he was the guardian is the government, all his stuff was at his social worker's office, and it took him, well, actually he never did get his documents. We had to go reapply for them because they couldn't find them. He couldn't get employment until he had his birth certificate and his social insurance number, which he didn't have access to. So just the basic things that we all have access to, he didn't have access to. And it stopped him from moving forward. So we with some of our funding, we took him in and paid for a birth certificate and got a new one and did those things so that he could move forward. Of course, right after we got it, his was magically found, but at least he has his own copy now that we don't have to rely on somebody else to help him. So those are just a few examples of the many things that the youth we work with have to deal with, and we feel it was why we have so many youth that are falling through the cracks, is because nobody's there to support them in those kind of situations. Tash, do you want to add anything to that about who we are? And
Karen always does such a good job with her words and explaining things. I'll kind of second Karen in just saying that I think it's really difficult for us to truly portray a lot of the stories and the ways that our youth have been successful over the past. Well, Karen's been supporting youth on her own for quite a while, and I have been working with youth since I was mentoring in a housing project here, and I think the stories are pretty consistent, and we touched on it a little bit yesterday with the ABSI cohort in our meeting, and I think just really understanding that it's basic human rights and meeting those basic human rights, and there's systems in place and there's resources in place that provide those, but the big gaps that Karen and I are seeing are the accessibility of those resources and those services. We had a youth earlier this year that was looking for housing, and part of it was COVID, but just needing to, how do we connect with them in order to go through the proper process of going through all the necessary assessments and things that are needed for that housing when they don't have even as simple as access to a telephone out on reserve. And so even just finding some simple, what we might experience as easily accessible resources are not as easily accessible to a lot of these youth. And Karen kind of mentioned a little bit just that underestimated. I think a lot of the work that Karen and I do is navigating, supporting, but also advocating. Just seeing the youth that we work with, they're so underestimated in their scene, whether it's for a criminal record or past trauma or past addictions, things that are going on in their lives. And Karen and I, because we have an opportunity to build relationship with them, see them for who they are, their potential, we can get to talk to them and hear their dreams and help them support their dreams and move forward in those. So just really, again, creating that family support and seeing the potential in them and getting to know them for who they are instead of just a number on paper, a chart, and maybe some struggles that they've been through has really been probably the most beneficial for a lot of them.
And I think it's, we building relationships with the youth, but also building relationships with one another. Tash, check your text because I was asking you permission to share a story. Just building those relationships with one another and building, and what I think we've really noticed within the system is it's really difficult to build relationships with, I don't really want to overgeneralize, but with some employees that are there from 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. And we've had people in these positions that have reached out to us outside of hours. And the story that I wanted to share is Tash and my relationship is when we met through Drayden. And we'd actually kind of met before through another youth, but he was very kept he's very good at compartmentalizing his people. So we had met, but we never really chatted. But when I was with Drayden, I'd come over, do homework at the house with him. We'd read, Tash was there. So we really got to build that relationship. And so she got to know me. And one night there was, well, it was Dre. He'd come home and he was, protocol at the house was when a youth comes in, you know, there's certain times you're supposed to call the police, basically. And so Tash, instead of calling the police, she phoned me and she's like, can you come over? And so I got in my car, went over there immediately, spent several hours with him, debriefing, de-escalating, talking, and, you know, ended up it kept him out of quote unquote trouble. It kept him out of the police coming to pick him up. Who knows what would have happened within the housing unit. Like, it was just, it saved him, our relationship, and Tash knowing that she could reach out to me for that support instead of having to go somewhere that could cause him more trauma and put him further down in the system was really, could be life-changing in those situations for some of our youth. And so those relationships are so important, and that trust is so important, that Tash could trust me to do that, and that she knew that I would come and answer that call. So Karen,
I'm just gonna jump in for a second and say, don't know if I've really spoke to much of this before. Karen and I sit, you know, in the same place right now with Dre's Angels, and before that, I was working for one of those resources that we speak of, and I think I've told Karen this before. The difference that it made knowing that those two youth that were living in my house had an external organic support that I could collaborate with for things was so much different than a lot of the other youth that I had come through the door of my house, living in my house with me. I didn't have anywhere to go. It seemed like if I had to go to management, or I had to, you know, call the cops or call 911 or do something in order for my own safety or their safety within the house, I didn't have someone to look to for support. I didn't have someone that I knew would support moving forward. And the only thing that came down the pipe was generally some kind of repercussions or consequences for that youth, instead of recognizing in a situation like Dre was in that it wasn't a consequence that was needed, it was support that was needed. It was a coping mechanism. It was someone to love and support him and tell him that everything's going to be okay. And working for an organization, I don't necessarily have those same relationships. I'm in the house and I'm building relationships with the youth, but there's still very much an authoritarian view because you're the one that holds the rules. You're the ones that hold people accountable for things. And so having that external support from Karen made a world of a difference with both of those youth. And I've seen multiple youth come through that house. I still do some work there. So the difference that having an organic support makes is huge. And that's what Karen and I are creating, that a lot of us have families that we can go to, but a lot of these kids are looking for resources and accessing the system because they don't have that. And just having that, someone to bridge the gap and someone to provide love and support instead of just money or telling them what they think is right, has made huge differences along the way.
thank you, Tash. So I don't want to go, I have no idea what we were at for time, but just so what's next quickly, we are, I was gonna set my timer and I just didn't. We are going to apply for our society status. So we're doing that right now so that we can start getting funding so that we can continue to support. And we've used our funding to support the youth and in like things like birth certificates and IDs and those kinds of things, and just a meal if they need it, housing if they need it, rent if they need it. But we will need to get more funding so that we can continue to do those supports. So right now that's kind of where we're at. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if you guys have, if somebody has a question for these ladies, I think that they'd be open to having a question. Let me just go on to the gallery view quickly. Brilliant. Roya, were you clapping or were you saying that you had a question? Clapping. Wonderful. Yeah, so if there aren't any questions, I just would like to point out that where I see Karen and Tasha as being as having this lens of really getting to really deeply know the system, which means that knowing the system from multiple sides is a beautiful place to be able to keep going with support and in a way that can change the system for those youth like Dre and his brother and these they're supporting right now who have needs that just aren't met with those gaps. So trying out things and iterating, it's all part of the social innovation work that we do. Thank you so much. Next on our list, we are going to do a little bit of a switch up here. We have a couple members of the virtual school program who, being in school, have a lot of demands on their time in the middle of the day, and we think they'll be able to be here soon. So we're going to have Jerome Morgan come and tell us about the work that he's doing next. So Jerome. Jerome is an innovator who's based in Sylvan Lake. He is someone who has been doing a lot with trying to support innovation and innovators to find a space who are BIPOC, to find a space within the greater social innovation community and to help to bridge a gap between techniques that are based very much in BIPOC communities and in ancestry and the ones that we have that are kind of the same old that we have. So I'm going to pass off to Jerome. I'm just going to make you the co-host right now and take it away, Jerome. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Really appreciate that. This has been really great. And looking forward to kind of sharing my project and the work that I've been doing. My project is on inclusive innovation. My name is Jerome Morgan. My day job is health promotion facilitator with Alberta Health Services, but I also do a lot of community building and support work, volunteering with the Black community, BIPOC community throughout Alberta. So my project kind of intertwines with a few different major pieces. So yeah, I'll go into it. So one of the biggest things that through my project that I've learned and the participants challenged me as a designer to do was to anchor myself in who I am and where I come from. And so when I thought about, what should I share about this project and what would be meaningful, is it the data? Is it, how many sessions I had, all those type of things? What was the conversations like? Yes. But I wanted to really give an experience of and show you what I was able to do with the participants and also show you who I am, because I think that carries more weight because it's really about values and storytelling. So I start with a griot, a West African storyteller. They're musicians, they're historians, they're artists, they're knowledge keepers, and they're innovators. I think through this journey, I've realized more and more how much of an innovator they are. And they would travel all across Western Africa and tell the stories of the land and its inhabitants, and also the animals and the villages along the way. They say that griots are not raised, they're born. And so I carry that from my culture, and I wanted to share that with you. For me, the drum is very powerful and really important. Sorry about that. The drum is really important. And so I've had the opportunity to build my own drum with the elder here. And I wanted to just acknowledge the ancestors of the First Nations communities within North America on this land for the knowledge and the blessings and support and guidance that they've provided me and as well as other settler people that are here. I also want to highlight, not only acknowledge the ancestors, but also acknowledge the buffalo, the animals that walk on the land, and also the animals that swim in the sea, and also the animals that fly in the sky. On my drum, to represent, the elder told me to make sure I represent your culture and represent who you are. And so on my drum, there's a 7 for 7 generations, but then there's also the mountains, which where I'm from, and it was a space of innovation for African people and Caribbean people. And then also the elder that's on my drum as well. The elder has big feet, and in my culture, the size of your feet is based off of how long you've walked. So the longer you've been able to walk, the bigger your feet. We carry our knowledge in our feet and in our stories. And so that's a huge part of how I show up in the world, and how I design and I facilitate and I innovate. Also want to highlight the elephant, the giant of Africa, and the drum of Africa, and the drum that comes with my identity and my story. And so it's bringing together the drum of this land, but also the drum of the land I'm from as well. I want to also acknowledge my ancestors. We're spirit people, and they're the ones that have, I'm here today because they've survived and thrived and innovated for me to be able to share today, and also set up for the next generations in the village, that as my purpose continues as well. So inclusive innovation, coming back to the main theme or course of my project. What is it? It's about inviting people who are living and working in marginalized communities to be part of the innovation that will impact them. It's about including them in the process of generating and developing new ideas and solutions that will change and improve their lives. So it's about including, but it's also about opportunities at the core. I love what Drea's Angels was talking about. Are we really providing opportunities for people to thrive and fully participate within our economy and within our communities? And so for me, supporting projects that will directly impact people in resource poor communities, the goal is to facilitate innovative initiatives that will open doors for everyone to participate fully in their economy and also their communities. We want people to be empowered and to live on their own terms. My original project when I first started and put things together was about supporting inclusive innovation with rural stakeholders within Central Alberta, Blacks innovators, Indigenous innovators, and people of color and immigrants. It was about increasing capacity for understanding and addressing complex problems in local communities, and exploring deeper understanding of sticky problems like rising unemployment, affordable housing, racism, community economic development, and rural mental health. At the core, it was very surface level. It was about shifting mindsets, cultivating skill sets, and providing people tool sets to be able to tackle the work that was in their local community. Then COVID hit. And that changed everything. I remember with one of my community partners at like 7, 8 o'clock at night talking, and she said, "Hey, we could wait till COVID's finished and then see how it goes over the next few months, or we could just move everything online and just do things on Saturdays and do things in the evenings." And I was like, you know what? Let's just do it. And probably that was one of the most important things, was you can't plan everything as an innovator, and so you just got to roll with it. And so that's what we did. In my first session, new group, 32 people participated of African, the Caribbean, and Black identity, and they challenged me in so many different ways, and challenged my co-facilitator and co-designer as well, around what are we anchoring this innovation stuff on? Why are we starting with where we're at right now in Alberta around, not being included or not fully participating? Why aren't we centering on where we come from and who we are as a people, and that we've been innovative people for centuries? And people have come to our continent and our lands to learn about how we've survived and how we build and how we innovate. And so why why are we centering ourselves from a post-colonial space? And so that was really impactful because I wasn't ready for that as a designer. I wasn't ready to be challenged, for my content to be challenged. I wasn't ready for my own, how I was showing up and wearing the hat of a facilitator more than I was wearing the hat as somebody that was part of the village. So questions developed around, what village are you from? What village are you building? And what village do we want to be a part of in the future and today? So this is a picture from the Caribbean island of Jamaica, where I'm from. And so connecting back to my roots and where I'm from a fishing and agriculture village in the parish of Clarendon. And a lot of our people settle in the hills because, one, you're able to see what ships are coming on the sea. And because it's an island, and so it's a place of safety, a place of survival, but also a place of thriving and connection. And the community relies on each other for survival, but also, more than anything, to also thrive as well. And it connects back to our roots of how we've gotten there too. I want to highlight part of the recognizing the ancestors and the history and the connections to not only North America, but these lands across the globe. I'm Jamaican Maroon by heritage, and when we were able to fight and get our freedom in different capacities, and we would hide in the mountains, we were able to sign treaties with, in 1739, the peace treaty with Britain and the Maroons. And these are things that are not part of history, but it's just so important because it shapes history. And so part of inclusion is also including the stories that were excluded, to tell a narrative, a different narrative, not about the people that should be part of it as well. And so I share that as in passing that history, and also recognizing African people that's come from the Caribbean, that has come to Canada in the 1800s because of some of these peace treaties. So a number of peace treaties were signed with the Jamaican Maroons. Actually, 3 were signed, and this is one of the first. I want to highlight Cujo, a freedom warrior. He's from the Ashanti tribe in West Africa, and he was one of the leaders of the Freetown Maroons in Jamaica. So just wanted to highlight his story and him as part of the ancestors that shape our stories, and also has shaped history as well. It's interesting where a highlight from 1739 and for 400, 500 years, Black people have been fighting. And now with Black Lives Matter, the echo of we still have to continue to fight. And we know the experiences and the importance of this, not only for us, but also the stories of Indigenous people that around the hands of the police and the state in different capacities. And so similar, there's a lot of solidarity there, but also just around understanding the fight hasn't stopped, and we're still fighting for freedom, and the way to be included into the Canadian society in a certain way, in an equitable and inclusive way, that where we're not surviving, but we're thriving as a people and contributing in significant ways as well. So the Black Lives Matter one created a lot of movement, but put the spotlight on a lot of things that we've been dealing with as a community, that Indigenous people and Black people has been dealing with, and just now folks are recognizing it. And so it was a huge part of my project in a way, because participants were walking in to sessions wanting to talk about this and wanting to talk about the trauma and pain of always fighting and not being included. And so I wanted to just acknowledge that as well, as that was part of the journey of navigating this work. I wanted to highlight African proverb, until the lion has its own storyteller, the hunter will always be the hero. I'm going to read that a second time. Until the lion has its own storyteller, the hunter will always be the hero. So the work, right? The program, what did I do? I've done 5 sprints and mapping sessions around mapping pieces around the Black community and what are the challenges and systems that they're navigating within Alberta. And I've done 5 sprints with rural innovators. I've done sprints with immigrant innovators, and I've done sprints just with community members that are wanting to just build their capacity. I've done 25. I've identified 25 different BIPOC and rural champions that I'm going to be connecting to the network that I want to showcase, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. And then also 32 different sessions, collaborative sessions and meetings and just points of just building capacity really throughout the 7 months. I've done over 57 cups of coffee and cups of tea, virtually, of course, because we have to social distance, but over 57 cups of coffee, a number of them with Babs and some of the key, the Catalyst members, and then also just mentors and community members that's kind of been championing and supporting my work. I've had over 100 people that's been part of the conversations over the last 7 months within the work that I've been doing on Saturdays and on weekends and evenings and during the day. So just to highlight the impact of the work. So what happened? We did innovation sprints around design thinking, really building capacity. Folks that have never talked and saw empathy map or a prototype or anything like that. All of the above, we were working on moving people through that and building that capacity. Also, when Brooks identified and presented about the Investment Readiness Social Finance Fund, and that really hit me because I started to, he highlighted that, you know, BIPOC communities weren't always represented and weren't getting resources, and so it made me really think. 1.2 million Albertans identify as being Indigenous, Black, people of color or immigrants, and so that's about 28%, and to know that less than 7% of those funding from the Investment Readiness Finance Program was going to people of color, that was huge. So I said, let me get a group together. So I was able to do 2 workshops just to highlight the funding and help people on their applications, and work with, you know, a specific Indigenous group just around it, because the application process was challenging in itself. And so just those type of things of recognizing that sometimes the traditional system doesn't really work. There's barriers in it for folks to be able to access the resources that are necessary. And so that was really significant. Did some systems mapping, of course, and then facilitated some pieces around collaborative leadership and capacity building. Peter Mansbridge. Why do I have Peter Mansbridge in my presentation? For me, as a Canadian and also as an immigrant that came here, Peter Mansbridge is one of the folks that I would sit with my great-grandmother and grandmother and watch when he did the national, and he was the face of being being Canadian, and he would talk about coast to coast of what was happening in Canada. And what was important was, for me, it was one of my first experiences of just kind of hearing a person that identified at his core to being Canadian, but also just having those experiences with my great-grandmother was really powerful, and sharing in that experience of becoming Canadian too. Second, Peter Mansbridge has a quote that Canadians are not good at creating their own heroes. And that really hit me. And you know, I'm 33 now, and I realize that this is so true. The face of what Canada looks like is a very white, Eurocentric, male, Anglo-Saxon perspective, and I think it's so important to have diverse stories that's more reflective of our country, because one, there's wealth in that, right? There's wealth in having multiple stories and celebrating our diversity. And so I said, you know what, in my project, this wasn't part of the original piece. How do I create BIPOC heroes and rural heroes within the work? And so that was something that I started to really look at. Some of the major outcomes from my project is now looking at building a Central Alberta Rural Stakeholder Innovation Network. We have a number of folks that are doing sprints and connecting and building capacity within Central Alberta. I facilitated a number of different workshops, and folks are wanting social innovation and design thinking and wanting a community to be connected to. And so we're working in isolation in our small communities like Ponoka and Drayton Valley and Rocky Mountain House and Black Falls and Stettler. And so now the idea is to bring them together as we for those next steps, and then connect them to APSI and connect them to the Network Weaver coalitions and all the above. But we're doing the work in our local communities, and I just wanted to honor that and recognize that. I also been working at developing, after doing some of those workshops, Black innovators across Alberta, just wanting to get a space to continue to build. And so being able to start fostering a Black social economy consortium is something that has started to develop as well. It's in being connected with some guidance from SETC, and a number of other partners will be pulled in as well as that continues to be developed. As I touched on the 25 BIPOC and rural innovators, the idea and the goal is to showcase them, showcase their work in their local communities, and really create those Canadian heroes that are not being talked about or discussed to fulfill that inclusion component, and to really let them tell their stories, because that's what's the most important thing. And then the 57 cups of coffee and tea, which just is a reminder of how community building and trust building works, is you just need to talk to people and just continue to push forward. My facilitator journey, there's obviously, my program, it has evolved in multiple different spaces. I think that's the key thing as a designer and as a facilitator. You can't get married to anything. You got to pivot and grow and evolve. For me, I've learned to be curious with myself and the communities and the work that I'm working in. To also be kind to the land, be kind to the people that I'm working with. They're walking with different experiences and knowledge, and also be kind to myself. This work is hard. Change making is difficult. There's a lot of weight that comes with it, and it's just being mindful that to just be kind to myself. Also, it was a reminder when those participants challenged me to center on my truth, center on who I am. That's more powerful than the content or the material. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, hey, we got to do these tools and we got to do this project, but really, it's really about the person that's also telling the story and facilitating the workshop. People can learn more about your values and who you are and what you stand for, and sometimes that's what creates the change that you need to see. Also, BIPOC communities, Indigenous communities, they're not always having spaces to unpack experiences of trauma and pain. Immigrant communities, that's one of the biggest learnings that I've taken and learned. Folks are walking in from their own countries and their own communities, and their systems have helped and also hurt them in different capacities, and there needs to be a space to be able to unpack that and learn and just understand what's happening, because our experiences are not binary and they're not all the same. I think when even talking to Indigenous young people, folks have identified that their experience is not all unique. It's not all the same. It's unique. Just when I'm talking to other Black stakeholders, same thing. A person from the Caribbean or the person from the continent, their experience is not the same, but their understanding of Blackness is different. And so being able to unpack that in a shared space, in a safe space, is so powerful to then be able to figure out where you want to navigate to next. And then also space to heal, heal together as a collective. It's so important. I started with story. The storyteller, the griot of my community and my ancestors. And so story and ceremony is vital for us to thrive and to heal and to have the spirit and the strength to push forward within the work that we do. Some other final pieces, trauma and pain is in the ecosystem. That's the giant elephant that's in the room, for us to never forget that. And we have to acknowledge it and then say, where do we want to go from here? It's a collective hand in building the village. It's not just the people of color. It's also the folks that have power, folks that are sitting in the seats. It's about partnership and collaboration. It's about allyship. It's about connection. We have to build the village that we want together, and we got to focus on that. We need a space to learn, fail, grow, and also prototype. It's so important, so vital. I started with mindset, cultivating mindsets, cultivating skill sets, and passing on tool sets. And now I realize it's about heart sets as well. The heart sets is what is going to move the needle and also champion us into where we need to go to be able to have the systemic changes that's going to make everybody feel included in this work. So design thinking and innovation tools, they don't come with the equity lens. They don't come with the inclusion lens. And so it's important for us to make sure that we're intentional about talking about diversity, talking about inclusion, talking about equity, because design also has a shadow. You can design a system that is exclusive, that's centered on exclusion, that's centered on for only some, and that's already been there. And so recognizing that design can be used for good or it can be used for bad too. So healing, I want to leave with that: the healing of our planet, the healing of our people, and the healing of our processes. So in our village, we dance, we play the drum, we connect. And so I want us to continue to beat our drum and continue to work together as part of the village in creating the village that we want to live in for the generations that are going to be coming after us, and also the generations that are here right now too. But we should never forget, we must always honor the ancestors of the past, because that's what's gotten us here. And so I started with the questions, and now I'm going to finish with questions. What village are you in? What village are you from? What village are we building? And what village do we want to be a part of? And so ask yourself, what village are you a part of? And to always know that you're part of a village. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerome. That was fabulous. We are running a little bit short on time. So if somebody has, I want to make sure that there's a chance that somebody has a question and isn't going to be able to stay to the end to ask it. I want to just give space really quickly for that. Okay, if not, then what I will do is ask you to reflect on what village are you from, and what village are we building, and what village do you want to be a part of as you go through. And think of that too as we flow into our next presentation, which is the virtual school project. So this is a project that is tied to the Edmonton Public School Board. It was one that Julia Dahlman had originally applied as a solo person for this. And then Naomi, who is the facilitator, who's in the room. Hi, Naomi. She's currently just on a maternity leave. And so Naomi had encouraged Julia to apply with more of a team around her. And so then that brought in Lyle Tutusis and Jean Stiles and Matthew Whitman into the group as well. And we're so lucky with everything going on with schools at the moment to have them all in the room to present with us. So I will pass over to you folks. I'm just going to make all of you co-hosts really quick.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Babs. So yeah, as we were introduced, we're the virtual school team. So we have Principal and Director, Dr. Jean Stiles, Cultural Liaison, Lyle Tutusis, Curriculum Coordinator, Matt Whitman, and I am a Community Liaison. And together, we've been kind of stewarding this virtual school process. And I'm going to share my screen now and see how we do here with presenting some pieces. If I could just press play somehow. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so we have we've been on a beautiful journey together around our virtual school project, and I'm really excited to see where we're going to go next. And we've been really thankful to be part of this Community Catalyst program because it's introduced us to people who've really expanded our thinking and really pushed us in ways that, and just helping us make connections in ways that we wouldn't have before. So to give you some background on our virtual school project, we started out with the problem of knowing that our education system isn't always the most culturally responsive that it could be. Often when we're talking about being inclusive of Indigenous ways of knowing and multiple ways of knowing in life, our education system kind of takes that as an add-on approach. Often it's after school clubs, different types of groups that might be formed, and it's often an add-on instead of embedded within our teaching processes and in our classrooms. So this is a photo of one of our favorite students. His name is Justin Sharphead. And he was talking about this idea of two-eye seeing. So, living a traditional life at home and having to be someone else when he came to school because his ways of knowing and being were not always able to come out in our school system. So we really took that idea of two-eye seeing and applied it to how we do our processes in education. And we set out to create a new model that would be more flexible and culturally responsive. And we're doing this in partnership with a technology firm called Nicoll, which is an Indigenous technology firm, and really looking at what would happen if we built a new system from the ground up. And so Nicoll is working with us to build a custom technology platform that really has student voice and equity as the drivers of it. And this looks at issues of bandwidth, knowing that students that live on reserve or students that are in more remote areas don't have the same bandwidth. And that means that there's access problems in terms of doing online learning in an equitable way. But then we also want to make sure that we're doing things in a blended way so that students can bring all of their learning into this meaningful way in the communities that they're part of. So we always have some online component and some blended components. So there's face-to-face learning happening, land-based learning, and concepts that really bring students to, their learning to life in their communities that they live in. Our critical friends in this work have been Matthew Ward, who's here with us today, David Gartner, Rob McMahon, and many more to come. So when we're talking about our work, we like to think about our mirror web and celebrating networks of support. And this is really turning the education system on its head because we're not talking about individual success and individual grade. We're talking about networks and communities of learners that's supporting each other on our learning journeys. And a mirror web is an example of an ecosystem. It's a map of an ecosystem that shows that the further out you are on this support network, the less sort of resilient that you are. The closer you are to the center, the more connections you have, the more support that you have. It shows that we're stronger together. And we're really trying to shape our education system on this idea. And I love that Kayla and Nicoll talked about ethical reciprocity in their presentation earlier, and this is again what we're trying to do. So we're trying to contextualize knowledge. So our education system often separates it. It's often some facts and figures that you need to learn and not always connected to the land in which that knowledge originates from. So we're trying to remake those connections, really talk about our learning in terms of this idea of ethical reciprocity, where the teacher is a host of knowledge and they have to connect it to how they came to that knowledge. Why did it matter for them and all of their relations? And in return, students take up their knowledge and make it meaningful for them and need to reflect on how it's impacting their lives, how it's impacting the way that it connects to all of their relations in return. So that's kind of the vibes that we're going for in terms of the way that we do our work. So the pandemic has been an interesting piece for us. COVID obviously has had a massive impact on all of our lives. And for us in our work, COVID actually increased the pressure in big time. So all of a sudden, all of school was online. It wasn't just our project that was looking at interesting and innovative ways to shape things differently. It was the entire school system across the province now looking for promising solutions to engaging online practices. And that put us in the risk of a premature launch. It put us in the risk of having some of our ideas out there, possibly going badly and then dismissed on a systemic level. So it was a really high pressure time for us to be doing this work. And we need to also recognize that at this time, there are multiple proposed solutions in the idea of how to work in public education in this shifting landscape. And all of these ideas are really contested. So this is an interesting time and a high pressure time to be doing this work. I'm going to, in rapid fire, before I pass it off, to talk about the overview of our work in the last 6 months. So we started with a course called our Ways of Knowing course, and this is where we use social innovation lab techniques, where we have students co-create and their learning. So we use techniques like rich picture mapping, a lot of different social innovation lab techniques to have them really contemplate where they wanted their learning to focus on. And our students chose the complex issue of becoming good treaty people on Treaty 6 land. And how does our education system relate to that? Students were able to work on really creative projects and give back to their community in meaningful ways. They all created personalized land acknowledgements, which are now used on the Pause podcast, which we are so grateful for. But it also shifted the system in a massive way where principals and school leaders across the division can no longer read a canned response. They can no longer not have a personalized land acknowledgement because of the leadership of our students in this course doing this work. So this disrupted the system because it really centers student voice. Students got to direct and create their own course and the learning that they did throughout that course. And it taught us how to create supportive communities online. We also ran 4 summer school prototype courses that explored an interdisciplinary approach to learning and a blended approach. So we had both online and, again, that face-to-face component. So we did core courses with this prototype. So we had a mix of English and Indigenous Studies 10, Math and Social Justice Leadership 10, Science and Design Thinking for Innovation, and also Indigenous Studies 10, 20, 30. So this is where grade 9 students going into grade 10 could earn 10 credits before they entered high school. And not only that, they did it in an accelerated way over summer school, while learning in this interdisciplinary, very enriched way of learning that also centered Indigenous ways of knowing at the core of all of the courses. So it really challenged basically the idea that grade 9 students couldn't take core classes in summer school. It challenged our assessment practices. It challenged how we build community online. And it challenged the way that we take up land-based practices and teaching in COVID. So now we've been able to start thinking about the ways that we're going to share this with the broader Edmonton community. And here's some pictures of some of the work that we did. So this is a picture of the rich picture mapping that students were doing during our piece. This is only one of the groups. We have our river walk that we were doing, teepee raising with Elder Philip Campio, and we had Dallas Arcandon as well when he was doing a teaching around his professional hoop dancing. And all of these experiences were incredibly enriching and amazing with our learning community. I think, for the sake of time, I was going to show a video, but for the sake of time, I think we're just going to post that to the group later. And I'm going to pass this over to Matthew Whitman now. If I can stop sharing somehow. Thanks, Babs. I've lost my cursor.
Just 1 second, sorry.
We work on Google Meets here at school, so it's Zoom is a new land for us in lots of ways. Even Lyle was struggling this morning because school computers have blocked Zoom because it doesn't meet our privacy policy. So we've been having all sorts of tech issues. So anyway, bear with us as we go from our Google Meet world to the Zoom world. You ready, Matt?
Yeah, what would 2020 be without tech issues? Sorry, Babs, would you be able to make me a host again?
Already done.
Thank you so much. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to just go through just kind of a quick look at the problem, some of the theory behind it, and some of the practice in making the change. So the problem is quite serious. So it's essentially that on a large scale that there's a lack of equity in serving the needs of students that exist on the margins of the public education system. These are students who live in rural and remote communities. These are students who practice traditional schedules, so whose families, say, go on the trap lines or participate in ceremonies like the powwow trail. These are students who find the classical model of schooling to be prohibitive due to their personal context, whether they're dealing with houselessness or other issues. And of course, the lasting colonial structures that are embedded within our education system. And so the change idea, the disruption, was to create a student-centered virtual community of learning that was informed by traditional Indigenous ways of knowing. So these are going to be, chief amongst these are the idea of oral culture. So the idea of within an oral culture, the use of physical objects as knowledge stores and representing knowledge, the idea of a gift economy, so meeting the needs, the learning needs in this case, of a society, of a community through gifting and offering rather than sort of transactional exchange as you might expect in a market economy, and of course meaningful land-based learning. And so as Julia mentioned, something, one of the key friends of ours who really helped us is a professor named David Gartner, who was introduced to us through Matt Ward. And so essentially the idea is that the digital space is sort of like a landless territory or a placeless space. But what Professor Gartner helped us to do is to create a deeper understanding of the way in which you can create a relationship between land-based learning and building place in the virtual sphere. So the plan was to use the opportunities presented by virtual technology to create a learning community that could do a few things. So number one, just the nature of digital interconnection itself, that sort of lattice work of networks and interconnection is quite in sync with the ethical relationality that is fundamental to Cree natural law. So there's kind of this very interesting connection between the digital networks and the idea of the interrelationships that we all exist in and can't break out of, whether we address those or do those in a good way or not. As well, a community that's land-based and rooted in the places that we share as a community. One that's flexible and asynchronous, which means like asynchronous. That's like an education sort of term for not doing things on a monochronic time culture schedule. So it's basically being able to meaningfully include different schedules and learning preferences, and to especially place students at the very center of their own collective knowledge building. So we used the ideas of Cree natural law as a touchstone. I won't go too much into it for sake of brevity, but the chief amongst these was this idea of Wokotowin, which basically says that all of existence, whether it's the material, the immaterial, what's existed before in the present or in the future, exist in this familial relationship. And essentially it's this idea that the universe itself is like a bundle of relatives. And what happens with one of the relatives affects the rest of them. So based on that and wanting to, of course, center Indigenous ways of knowing in a good way, we decided that we would take this idea of the bundle and create a learning community based around the notion of the bundle. So a bundle is a collection of these mnemonic devices, these physical knowledge stores, these vessels in which oral cultures record their history, their stories, their knowledge, their teachings, their things like that. And in a way, sort of like analogous to a library, it's the full repository of a community contained in a bundle, and like a physical bundle of objects. And if you were the bundle carrier, your job would be to be the biographer, the historian, the teacher, the librarian of the community, and keep knowledge alive. We also very much went off of the idea of the gift economy. So again, an economy is just a system in which the needs of the members of a community are met. And so again, we tend to think of economics exclusively in regards to the market economy, but within a gift economy, the idea is that because you are living in this Wokotowin, this nature of everyone being interrelated, you're expected to give to the community without the expectation of a like return. And so giving and offering is sort of the norm within a gift economy. So we also took a look at the fact that social media has actually taken the idea of a potlatch and a gift economy, and they have commodified it. They've commercialized it in a way that's really broken it from its traditional roots and taken away its nature. And so essentially Facebook has shown that the idea of a large scale mass gift economy can work, but this needs to be disrupted and re-indigenized in order for it to be something that's authentic. So the idea was to create a set of courses and eventually a learning platform around these ideas of the gift economy and giveaways, as well as knowledge bundles. So to create a community knowledge bundle in which all of the community members are incentivized to give to the community, to give their learnings, their knowledge in the forms of offerings to the entire community. So we also partner with Adam Mickey, as Julia said. This is an early wireframe of what our custom platform and interface may look like. And not only have they been there for us to help to build this into roadmap, but they've been very influential in shaping our understanding of the idea that the ownership must be within the community. That unlike Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, who colonized and took the idea of the gift economy away, took it from the community, claimed ownership over it and monetized it, that the knowledge must belong to the community. There must be this digital sovereignty. Okay, I will finish up. So our first iteration was this year-long Ways of Knowing course, which involved 6 high schools over 10 months, using sort of systems analysis and action research, which led to a few in-person virtual summits, some amazing products, whether these are online products or these personalized land acknowledgements, which were phenomenal. Our second iteration was Summer School 2020. So as Julia described, there were 4 virtually centered learning communities. We did some phenomenal traditional land-based learning experiences. So a river walk, visited a lodge, things like that. And we've finished by creating a digital knowledge bundle, which is owned by the community. Here's a few of the offerings. They include things from a Stitch Wakotoan sort of tea cozy, exploring the idea of interrelationships, to a red hand dancer, a video game character that a student modded up. So we created this phenomenal digital knowledge bundle, which maybe we can discuss later. And I will pass it over to Lyle, who had the interesting job of making sure that proper protocol was followed in a virtual space during a pandemic. So yeah, Lyle.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Nice. So one of my roles was to help with protocols, and from my background with a lot of the past couple of years, building relationships, family, and being connected in the communities in and around Saskatchewan and Alberta, I thought of working with Matthew, Indigenous Studies, the content that we were going to learn, and looking at the list of stuff that we wanted to present and talk about and bring into the class, working with that with guest speakers and bringing in authentic presenters and originality to the land, to the knowledge that we wanted to bring into the class. And the protocol was a really huge, was kind of a challenge, to be honest. I'm a cultural, traditional person, and also contemporary, with always pushing revitalization and knowing the past and things like that, with working together in the future in a good way. And saying that protocol, working with our guest speakers, if it wasn't for like COVID, how it normally would work is that you would offer protocol, tobacco, to an elder or a guest to ask for them to come in and speak about these certain topics. And sometimes they're challenging topics such as residential school, an experience, a life experience growing up, a life lesson, a teaching, a story, a song, whichever it may be. We brought in a dancer who like got fully dressed on camera and talked about his regalia and the feathers and the importance, what it meant to them. And these things, the protocol is so important because, you know, if you haven't really picked sweetgrass or sage in a summer, in a summer during the day, you know that the factors such as the sun, if you're sweating, the mosquitoes, being down on your knees in the ground, getting dirty, saying prayer for why you're picking the sweetgrass and the sage. Tobacco's the same thing. Tobacco is important because it's a bond and connection that people make when you are coming to an agreement, just like they would a long time ago in a peace pipe. And that's why that tobacco is really important, because it's an agreement. It's done through all ceremonies in different tribes, and that's what we use when we do things today. So with knowing that, a lot of the guests we brought in were like family, friends I've built connection with over the past couple of years, and these people were they have that understanding that as in their roles as an elder, as a knowledge keeper, as a dancer, a drummer, they have these gifts, but they also know that the importance and responsibilities to these are for the youth, for the people, and they've honored the protocol which we had offered either through text or phone, talking to them over the phone, or on a Zoom meeting to express and explain that because of COVID, everyone's safety, that we would in return offer protocol in person. We would mail them gifts. We would because if they were in person, after they presented, we would give them a gift, sometimes an honorarium, but before they would present, we would offer protocol. We'd offer tobacco in explaining what we'd want them to do for their presentation. So these are all relationships that that we brought in that were really very knowledgeable, and a lot of times a lot of people can't do. Like if we think about other schools or different schools, they don't have a liaison. They don't have someone that's super connected in the community. We had people that were very at times very challenging to even talk about an experience that was like traumatic, or sometimes even something they never spoke about in a long time. So that's why the protocol was super important. So that was one of the challenges because of COVID. And they all understood the importance, and thinking about the youth, thinking about how things are now. And when that protocol is given or has agreed upon, it's like shaking hands. It's like it's like building that connection and that relationship, so that anything that was shared, we were given the right and permission to share how we see fit in the best way we know how, which was in our class directly with our students, who then branch and talk about what they've learned. So with that, yeah, that was one of our challenges, and because of COVID, we continue to have those challenges. I still have these challenges every day, presenting here at JP, and I see that being a hard struggle for a lot of people and a lot of different schools and communities because of COVID.
Thanks, Lyle. And now Jean is going to close us up.
Yeah, and I'm really mindful of the time. Thank you. What an amazing team I've been privileged to work with. And I think we just want to bring sort of the final pieces to this is that when we're thinking about this work and the impact it's had systemically, we're thinking about disruption from the inside out. And really, it's about dismantling this education system from within, which is actually a relatively new idea because people always want to come with these ideas about how they can fix us. And we're taking the opposite approach, which is if we try things, if we action things through the social innovation labs, through bringing critical voices to the table, to really supporting agency in who comes to those conversations, we can shift what happens from the inside out. And in fact, there's not a quick fix. There's not magic bullets. We are, we're going to come to somewhere different if we really do honor the people that are involved within the system. And so I think that's a very interesting space. It's had huge impact for our system, both at in our division, where we're seeing that we're being called on to do professional learning with a number of different sort of teaching and administrators, which I think is interesting. We're being asked to run more courses. We're being asked that those students come in and share their gifts broadly. We're seeing that provincially it's having large impact, and that through universities we're getting asked to come in and do some facilitation around that work. And it's even interacting with international spaces. So we've done some work with Iceland, and certainly involved in a conference where we're taking this notion that it's not about coming in and you need to be more creative, you need to be this, you need to add something on to what you're already doing. It's about, we really believe, this notion of driving with equity and engagement, and that really can get us there. So it's working from within and being courageous. And so I think it's had lots of impact, and it's really also through the talents of our team that are on screen with you. So thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you guys so much. And yes, it's been a wild ride, and I think I made a mistake in trying to ask everybody to share their stories in just 15 minutes. I think we could give everybody at least an hour to talk about the work that they're doing. We're going to switch over next to Eduardo in Alabama. They are doing some amazing stuff down in their home on their permaculture farm. I got to go and visit them and eat buffalo berries with them. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to have them share with you the work that they're doing on food security and on working with youth in Siksika.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. Uki ni Sturitaniku. My name is Eduardo Manyheads. My Blackfoot name is Iko Kimi. And
Uki ni Sturitaniku, Alabama Kip. My Blackfoot name is Eki Sisiaki, and that means lizard cutting woman.
And I guess our journey starts back even before Treaty 7 was signed, with the decline of the buffalo. And at that time, a large part of the reason why we, as Blackfoot, signed Treaty 7 was because the years leading up to it, we had really realized, the herds aren't the same as they were, and we don't know what the future is going to look like. So we need to have some kind of agreement going forward. Whereas in the past, we were known to be a very warring tribe. For us to come to treaty really means that things are really dire. And early in our journey, when we had started researching food security, like especially here on the Siksika, it sounded really intense in the past, like stories of Chief Crowfoot with buffalo bones in hand, digging at, trying to plant the first food crops, because usually we didn't plant food crops. We harvested and foraged naturally and ran the buffalo and hunted and all that. And so for us, it seemed like up until the point, in history, like up till now, Siksika and a lot of nations throughout Canada and Canada itself really don't have a solid food system, at least one that's like secure and includes high nutrient dense food and involves more people instead of a few people on tractors and huge tracts of land. So when we started, we had actually taken a business conference, or we went to a business conference, and something that really stuck out was somebody had told us, find something that's missing in your nation and try to bring that back. And we were actually going for a drive through Blackfoot Crossing, and just both kind of thought, yes, there's a land out here. Like it's not all the land in the world, but there's some land here, and yet we're not like, it seems like we're not eating from it, or we're not benefiting or getting the right yields from it as we should. And so we started researching, how do we do that? And obviously people throughout the reserve had tried gardens and chickens and all these different kinds of things. Like I know Bama's grandmother, actually her great grandmother, has stories of having like a fruit orchard of peach trees, apple trees, and different
Pear trees.
yeah, pear tree. And just it seemed that had kind of been lost, or nobody had kind of picked it up again in a community scale kind of thing. So we researched, how do we do that? And it didn't look like just greenhouses, and it didn't look like having a bunch of cattle, because we already have cattle. And the places that have big greenhouses, they're for like really main food crops like cucumbers, tomatoes, and Medicine Hat, or for like cannabis, like huge greenhouses, right? And none of that really did what we wanted to do. So we just kept researching, and we came across permaculture, which is really great. Is the systems approach to solving these issues of what we want to do with our land and get out of our land. And when we took the course, we were really surprised that so much of what we were learning in permaculture had been taken from native cultures and really just put into kind of a way that we could see the different things that all these different cultures were doing and take the best from it, and like what were they thinking in doing that, and how do we use that in our own systems. So we took the course, and then it was kind of a back and forth struggle here on the nation to get funds and support to actually do something. Like even though we presented to say chief and council, there wasn't really any traction that we got from it in the first 2-3 years. So it wasn't really discouraging. Like people were always encouraging us and saying, no, this makes sense, and of course we want to do this. But like in terms of leadership and management, there wasn't really that connection there at the time. And so last year we decided we just have to go for it, and we have to try something. So we started building our permaculture farm, and we started with 100 chickens, and 100 seemed like a lot at the time, but I think it was just what we needed to do, because like just a couple chickens or just thinking small or like, that's really not what we need. I think we really need big ideas to solve our problems that we have. And so we went kind of big, and it was a great year looking after them and learning. And in that time, we had just kind of kept showing up to the right meetings when other people hadn't, and managed to acquire funding and partnerships to build the greenhouse that we did end up building, which is a 4-season climate battery greenhouse, which is part of where the ABSI funds went to. The fan that you can probably see behind here, it's kind of a tall fan. It kind of connects down here, and you can see our fresh beds of lettuce, and we have corn in the background. So the fan, it pushes the air into the ground and turns the earth into basically a battery where we store hot air and cool down warm air in the summer. And why we really went with this is because, like, in order to do what we want to do, which is produce food year round and be a real like food system on the reserve, and not just like occasionally have food and or always going to the grocery store. We want to be like a food center. And in order to do that, you have to have food year round, which means livestock, and in our cold climate, a greenhouse like this one, because there's other ones like glass greenhouses or just polycarbonate greenhouses that won't last through the winter. And permaculture and just life experience really taught us we really have to double down in our territory, that we get hit with winds and wildlife and everything.
Hail.
Yeah, hail. Yeah, so that was kind of last year. We had started up our food system and homestead. And then as ABSI was beginning, we were in the process of really developing programming to bring youth into what we're doing and help to build things up that way. And that's what we started doing. And then when COVID hit, everything for us just kind of became more important. Like the systems that we were going to put in place for our animals became more important because, say, like going to go get feed isn't as secure anymore. You can't maybe go to the store for a couple months because of COVID. What else?
Like a project with the Elders Lodge.
Yeah.
That kind of came up.
Yeah. So especially like COVID really showed so much of the flaws here on the nation, and I know everywhere. But one thing was nobody could really go out and do anything in the community, especially our Elders Lodge. And so we've really kind of pivoted towards trying to create a safe space outside for them. Has been a lot of our project in the last half of the year, which has been great. Just planning that out and learning from it. The learning experiences from kind of like the COVID time of this year have really been just learning how to manage multiple projects and dealing with our people, because things, when it comes to our people, you have to do things a little differently, right? As we all know, it's not just like the cookie cutter problem or solution. You really have to get to know the people in the community and work with them. And it's been great. It's been really great making connections at the health department, and we managed to bring together the overall Blackfoot Confederacy, our health department, and our land management all on one project, which was a really great experience. And I guess just during COVID and trying to do food systems, it's been really interesting reflecting on just where we're at in terms of like abundance and food and community. It feels like we're really at like a low level right now, right? And I really tie that to the buffalo and how there's very few buffalo that are like free and wild. Luckily, thanks to the Banff and the reintroduction initiative, there are some in Banff National Park, which I kind of feel is like us. Like there's a couple right now who are trying to do it and they're out there struggling, but once the population grows and more are, you know, regenerating the land through the grass and just proper management, the actual abundance of the land and where we are will really show itself. And yeah.
When you heal the land, you heal the people.
Yeah. Recently, going into the fall, we've kind of started up our program again, and what we really want to do with it now is we really want to connect our youth to our elders is a big part of our project now, by getting them to do a lot of the stuff at the Elders Lodge for the landscaping and just trying to build connections between them. And really brainstorming how do we do that in a safe way, and just making the right connections.
Yeah, and building community on our side, I suppose, because we're pretty far out here. But it's nice when like some of your neighbors will come and bring you like 5 or 10 egg cartons because they thought of you and they thought of our chickens, and they bring
Yeah, it's been really funny. A lot of people have said that we're like the new Eggman, or like the new Eggman and Eggwoman. And at first it was kind of like, you kind of take it with a grain of salt at first because it kind of sounds funny. But then you realize the real deeper meaning behind it, in that, you know, you're the one who's hunting, you're going after food and you're bringing it to the community.
And it's hard work.
Yeah, and it's extremely hard work. We've had to, like, it's been super stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
And a really big reflection moment for me has been when kind of a person that I really look up to, and is really like kind of building this farm and getting community and just doing this kind of lifestyle, said that 7 years into it, he almost had like a breakdown and a crash because he just went too far into it without grounding himself, which is really important. And just making time for that has been important in the past few months. After scrambling all summer, we had a really bad coyote attack where we lost about 40 of our young chicks this year, which was really a moment where we had to just move on right away and clean it all up, and we had to go to a meeting right away. And it was just we had to be able to just put it aside and not feel for it too much, which was a big learning moment. Being able to just not necessarily disconnect yourself from it, but realize,
be strong about it.
Yeah, to be strong and realize these things are going to happen and life has to go on.
Yeah.
So now we built them a reinforced chicken coop was a big project lately. It's an 8x16 really nice chicken coop where they won't get attacked anymore. And yeah, this year has been a lot for us, just learning how do we put in place systems that'll self-sustain for a while, and
I think even like our construction skills, so we didn't really have coming into this, but now that we're like building more, we kind of have more confidence and like, oh yeah, we'll build this.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we want to really bring the youth in on, is building all these like small projects. Like recently we built an outhouse and the chicken coop. We still have plywood to do in the greenhouse. And there are all these small skills that we didn't realize we didn't have until we started building stuff last year, and that now we really want to continue sharing and yeah, building community over food and sustainability. Anything else like that?
I don't know. Like our biggest failure.
I would say going forward, what we're really focusing on is like the grass in where we live. We happen to live in a really nice kind of pristine grassland area, but the grass itself is overgrazed. And so I think next year something we really want to do is to improve the overall pasture land. So take care of the earth, because as we take care of it, it'll take more and more and better care of us. Like when we have tall grass again, I know we can have way more cattle than we do, and we can start to process them and just do a lot more. We can get more yields off the land from the wildlife to things like porcupines and badgers, and really utilizing the work that they do in nature to support the farm and everything we do. Like one I guess what I'll leave with will be that we have a badger that's been showing up really close to our house lately. And at first I didn't really know what to think, like how do we get rid of it? Because it could kill the dogs, the cats, and the chickens. And so it's really worrisome to see all these big holes popping up around. But it's been interesting not just kind of letting him be. And he's kind of like stayed his distance around, but we can see him digging like new holes everywhere. But a big problem we have is gophers down here. And right now he's eating at least like a gopher a day or 2 gophers. And
so the problem is the solution.
Yeah, the problem is the solution. And I guess just learning from nature and taking the time to really
understand.
Yeah, understand what nature is trying to do. I think that's all we have for now.
Thank you guys so
some more pictures and stuff. We had worked on a couple, but we've got a ton to share with you guys, so they'll be up there soon.
Perfect. We'll throw those onto the ABSI website as well. All of these groups are going to have their own little section permanently on the ABSI Connect website, where we'll be able to gather a lot of the things that they've been able to share, and we'll put their recording of each of these pieces there as well. So thank you guys so much for the work that you've been putting in. It's been amazing to be able to see the processes and how the community is coalescing with and for you and you for them. And I wrote down the line that you said, that when you heal the land, you heal the people, because that's exactly the way that you guys are taking it on. So thank you so much for bringing in that ecological perspective as part of the work. Our final presenter, last and certainly not least, and for those of you who are seeing this as a piece of a recording afterwards, because we just had so much exciting stuff going along, you know, we'll put this section at the first, or do a special highlight on this, because we really want to make sure that nobody misses the amazing work that Eily has been doing. Eily is an artist who has worked for many years professionally. She's a very talented musician and recording artist and has a whole lot of heart. And through this process, I've really seen her grow as someone who is an innovator in being able to have function follow form, form follow function, to be able to see what she needed, and then to go out and find in challenging COVID times exactly the tools and technologies that she needed to be able to make her processes seamless. So it's been so exciting to be able to work with Eily over the last few months, and I'm so excited to have her take us away. Give me 1 second and I will make you co-host as well in case you need to share your screen.
Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So many beautiful stories that have been shared. And I don't want to rush through this, but I also want to honor people's times and know that if people need to leave, they need to leave. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Oh, oops. All right. Oh, okay. Just wait a second. I made a mistake. This is the second slide. Here's the first slide. So I'm Eily, and this is the Harp Fairy. The Harp Fairy is a clown character that I've developed for a number of years, and she's been a critical part of my project over the last 8 months. And here you can see a still of her as a part of a video that I created that I'm just finishing working on with a song that I wrote called I'm Here With You. So she's been a really beautiful part of connecting with the C-Space community. So with the onset of COVID, I shifted my focus to how can we create meaningful connection online. And this is, Johan Hari is one of my mentors, and his research on mental health has really influenced the way that I come to approach mental health and look at the solutions for it. So to overcome our depression and anxiety, the first step and the most crucial is to come together. And how do we do that? I had an important idea that I came and I presented to ABSI at the beginning, but with the support of my mentors, James Stouch and also Babs and Naomi, I really came with a beginner's mind. And one of the most powerful ways of looking at this problem is through bringing it into the body, bringing it into an embodied problem-solving method that I'm a facilitator in called systemic constellations. And so it was March 17th, like the day before C-Space King Edward's Art Hub, where I'm doing my project, closed. I brought together 7 participants and an external facilitator to really look into what is this project? What is mental health? How can I support this with the support of ABSI, with the support of my community? And it's really beautiful what Eduardo in Alabama just shared about the badger. The problem is the solution. I wanted to actually share this. The man who is representing the issue of mental health said, "I was so heavy with anger and despair, and then I wanted to dance, and I am the solution. Now I am the creative force that helps you." So this gave a lot of strength to me moving forward, and I decided to just no barriers. And I stepped into the Harp Fairy as a part of bringing that creative force to my community through building an Instagram page. This was one of my first photo shoots that I did within the C-Space community, and this is me playing with the curtains in the theater. And so far I've done 42 different posts online and almost a couple hundred followers. Many of them are C-Space community members. I also learned how to bring my music online. I worked with several different international facilitators and built this online meditation that I've done 15 different meditations online to people all around Canada and the United States. And I learned so much about how to bring my presence online, how to bring people together and build meaningful connection online. So it was a practice ground for me. A really important step was bringing a team of people together and really touching into the pulse of the C-Space community by having many different phone calls with the tenants and the community. And I came out with 3 really beautiful people, Katie Witt and Kristen and Bunny Batista from the community, as well as a mental health advocate and her 5-year-old. Our 5-year-old Maya is our play and creativity expert, by the way, and Harold Shinatso, who's an open space technology facilitator from the United States. And what Harold really helped is he gave us that perspective of the international lens of what we were doing. And from his perspective, we're the only group on the planet that's using music and creativity in collaboration with open space technology to support mental health. So we're really on the cutting edge of this work. And so we came together and created a collaborative art piece using systemic constellation work and our own hands to create this visual that you'll see here. Open space at C-Space, find your creative place. So it really, the visuals in themselves invite us into a collaborative, creative, multidisciplinary experience that I've learned how to describe over these several months. So the first couple events that we put on were in collaboration with Alberta Culture Days and C-Space. We received some grant funding for that, in addition to ABSI support. And yeah, we hosted them on September 10th and September 26th. And we had some people from around North America, as well as a participant from Paris, come in. So the beautiful thing about shifting to the online environment has been that we have access to people around the world now to come into the creative community of C-Space. And what I learned to do is I worked with this online platform called KikoChat, learned how to program it and bring the method of open space technology online. And basically what it is an opening circle, and from that opening circle, the people and the participants come up with the agenda of the event. And then this platform is like a social wrapper around Zoom meetings so that we can actually move in between spaces very similar to the freedom of movement in an in-person event. And so our first question is, how can art inspire us to create meaningful connection? And here's this is me setting up at C-Space online. So I actually logged in right from the place we would have been together if we were in person. Here's our second circle of participants from all around the community. And I wanted to share some specific stories with you. This is a story from Tony Estevez, and we're in the space, Shona Ray, so we're experimenting with open space and also a sort of elements of an open house. So we had a couple of rooms that were just live feeds. So artists were set up in there and they were just creating away and had the computer right next to them. I actually startled Shona Ray at one point because she was so busy working on her art and wasn't used to a computer in front of her. But Tony had the opportunity to just connect with her. And here's one of his testimonials. He said, the event is one of the best, if not the best events he's attended. And Shona Ray told him that you're an artist. And that deeply impacted him. He didn't realize that he was an artist and he had that creative capacity within him. Here's another beautiful moment. Maya, our creativity and play expert, she hosted a session. You can see on the right side here, this is our bulletin board. And so Maya had her land of exploration and play, and it's up to whoever wants to join her session. So at this point, it was Darren, Harold, and myself, and she decided to sing for us. She asked us if we wanted her to sing, and it was a beautiful experience of receiving on a multi-generational level. Here's another experience and session that Pete Oxland hosted on the power of sharing our stories. He's an employee of the Distress Center in Calgary, and he's listened to 600 calls, distress calls. And this is one of his testimonials. Rarely, if ever, has he had the opportunity to gather with others and talk about things we decide are important and care about, all in such a safe and respectful environment. It was a true gift, one that he felt privileged to be a part of. And I am working with the Distress Center with the potential of bringing this format to their community of volunteers and employees right now. So this is connected to the law of 2 feet, which is a part of open space technology. And basically what it means is, just like in a preschool classroom, kids just move around whatever they feel moved to go to. They go to the paint center, they go to the toy center. And these are all the session titles that we came up with the in the 3 events I put on around Spanish, crafting, online art, mental health, storytelling, and the power of 2 feet, of really empowering each other to choose our own sessions, to choose what we're called to, created this kind of incredibly meaningful experience for all of us. And yes, this is the Harp Fairy. It's hard work. I gotta say, many of us have also said this, but it's really heavy lifting building community and also helping describe what this kind of an experience is for people who have never had a meaningful connection in a community setting, for example. So this is our 3rd event, and yeah, it was just last Saturday, October 24th, and our question was, how can we find, grow, and share our creative places? And we had 30 participants. This is one of the sessions that David Swan, the former MLA and Liberal leader of Alberta, presented on art and rocks and nature. So we had a really great discussion with the CEO of C-Space, Dieter, and Babs, and a woman from California, as well as a member of the Alberta Craft Council Gallery. This is also an art piece that we created online using Zoom Annotate from the session. Another really fun quote to really represent that this space of just 3 hours, you get such a feeling of aliveness and energy. And my friend Alex Meyer was just concerned that he couldn't split himself into 3 or 4, so that was great. This is a really beautiful story. I had my dear friend and elder Leonard Cardinal join, and he offered some beautiful storytelling and insight into people's lives. And this was a specific session on mental health and poetry. And I wanted to share what Anne Kirsten experienced. He actually helped her find her spirit, nature spirit totem, which is fireweed, through a story that he shared. And also just, so Anne's a part of our team, and she's been at 4 different events now. And I think what her testimonial really shows is that learning how to be in community takes time, and learning the value of community also takes time. And after 4 of these events, she looks forward to it, and it completely energizes her afterwards. This is our closing circle from the last event, and we all use a talking piece in our own spaces to tune into what we've learned and share, harvest what we're leaving with. There's a lot of energy in that one. Here is a butterfly word cloud to represent some of the words that people used of the closing circle from the last event on the 24th. And the butterfly is also an element of open space technology. The butterfly is a person who doesn't go to any sessions, who just tunes in, maybe just looks from the sidelines to a computer and creates or does whatever they want. In an in-person event, it would be someone just hanging out in the hallways and not going to any of the rooms or any of the sessions. So there can be profound moments in that. So what's next? I do feel a little bit like I've built this metal car in a playground with the support of ABSI, and there's wheels that are missing to move around. I feel that this project has so much potential, and it's really just the beginning. Prototyping it has shown me that once people learn the power of community and they really experience it, it could go like wildfire. And we need this so much in our lives right now. People are more isolated than ever before. And I think I've proven through this work and through this experimentation that we can create meaningful, long-lasting connections in the online environment. I want to say too that the next open space event is going to be hosted in November, on November 19th. And I'm going to be doing that in collaboration with ABSI Connect and bringing change makers from all around Alberta into the online space that I've created through C-Space. I also want to say that I just found out this morning that I'm one of 6 composer artists in residence with 6 Wayfinder. I applied for an application that Roya shared with me, and I'm going to be one of 6 composers from Singapore, UK, and from Poland and also Canada. So this is like a huge celebration to leave this program with, jumping off into something else really meaningful. And I think I'll just leave it there. I have a video that I'd like to share, but I'll send that out as a link for people to listen to in their own time.
Fantastic. Wow, congratulations, Eily. I know you've been looking forward to hearing from that. I'm so pleased that they chose you in on that. That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, and we're really, really happy with what possibilities there are in adding wheels to that little metal car to be able to take and drive it around. So with that event that's happening November 19th, you'll be seeing, all of you who are here and listening to this will be seeing invitations to that through the ABC newsletter and through our social media. We're looking to be able to get together thinkers and doers and movers and shakers and change makers and innovators who care about thinking forward about the ways that we can come together and build towards the Alberta we want to see in the future. So thank you so much, Eily. I really see a great deal of excitement in the way that you've been able to create an augmented reality version of C-Space, and more importantly, the way you've been able to help build community. So I'm so glad to see that there's going to be a continuation with the Artists in Residence program.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do it without ABC. I mean, what you're doing is so important, and I hope this program continues for sure.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end. I see we still have a few people who are around. If there's anybody who has any questions for any of the group, now speak now if you've got them. All right. What we will do, oh, sorry, Bama, did you say something? I saw that you were on mute, but your mouse was moving. No, you're good. Okay, awesome. So what we will do is we'll make sure that we've got a way to help contact each of the programs directly, each of our now graduated catalysters. You can have a way of contacting them. And we'll post their stories onto the ABC Connect website, and we'll also do our best to keep our claws in you. So at this point, what I have is I am going to steal something from Eily from the C-Space to help us close out with a little bit of sharing our energy. So in fact, Eily, since this is yours, I think I'll ask you to unmute and lead us through, and I'll get everybody in the meantime to start rubbing your hands together.
Okay, yes. So rub your hands together, and we're going to stand up. So just allowing our bodies to be more grounded on the planet Earth. And so rubbing our hands together, and at the count of 3, we're going to just clap and yell, "Yay!" I think that's what Harold said. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Yay! Thank you all so much for joining us along the journey, and stay tuned for what we do with this going forward. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Kayla Matson.